It's the halfway point of the NFL season as Will and I are going to be giving both the Rams and the Chargers a progress report. How did they do this first half of the season? Is Herbert exactly what they wanted? Is Jared Goff the real quarterback for the Rams? How are they doing this first half? Find out in this next episode of Sideline Sports Podcast. Welcome to Sideline Sports Podcast. If you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast.
Yeah, that's my thing.
We're bringing you another edition of Sideline Sports Podcast. I'm the host, Alex Naveja, where if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. The source of all of your SoCal sports. And of course, with me today is the man himself from CBSLA, a sports reporter, very knowledgeable of the game of football. And you know what? If you've followed him, he's a man of golf. He is just a magnet right now with the Masters that are going on right now. None other than Will Hernandez. Will, thank you again. How's it going, man?
Hey, what's going on, Alex? Thank you for having me on, and thank you for that intro. Yeah, Masters is going, man. I'm loving it. I'm trying to soak up every second I can. I think it's going to be a pretty good finish. This tournament, this Masters, obviously got postponed due to the pandemic. Usually happens in April. Now it's in November. So, yeah, man, I'm just enjoying life. How about yourself?
Everything's been pretty good right here, keeping the content going for all of our guests here. There's been a lot of action going on here in LA, as you know it. You're pretty familiar with everything that's going on. Just trying to keeping up with what's going on even now. Rams, Chargers, USC, UCLA. Got a lot of stuff going on. You got to be happy to be here in SoCal. But, I mean, we'll see. Maybe one day we'll see you in the Masters. Well, who knows? We'll probably end up seeing you, maybe even one of those charity games that a lot of the celebrities have.
We'll see about that. Maybe a charity game. I don't know about the Masters. Maybe, hopefully, I think now that I'm definitely into golfing, it would be a dream of mine to go to Augusta and visit it. I'd probably pay whatever it costs to pay there, if I can afford it, of course. But, yeah, man, I think for now the ceiling might be a charity tournament, celebrity charity tournament, maybe.
Geez, I would be happy just to be there in attendance to be able to see that. As we were talking about it, I can't even hit the golf ball. So, but you know who is actually hitting their targets right now? Justin Herbert right now. I mean, I think this is a quarterback and the future of the Chargers, and I think that he has a bright future with the team, but that record's not exactly a reflection exactly of the team right now. So, Will, take it away. What have been your thoughts this year for the Chargers as far as this first half is concerned?
Well, you started off, Justin Herbert, he is the man. He's everything that the Chargers envisioned he would be when they drafted him, 6th overall or 5th overall, whatever it was. He's the next, you can argue, Phillip Rivers. I'd argue he's going to be way better than Phillip Rivers because, he's a guy who, obviously he's young, so right now he's pretty much at his prime, athletically. But he has been everything the Chargers could hope for. Granted, I would argue that had Tyrod Taylor not gotten hurt, the whole it was really funky the way he got hurt. He had his lung punctured by the team's athletic trainer. But, if that doesn't happen, Tyrod Taylor may still be the quarterback, and we're having a different conversation like, oh, when's the time to put Justin Herbert in? Because, unfortunately, as you mentioned, the Chargers have been really good. Justin Herbert is great. The offense, according to Football Outsiders, they're the 6th best passing offense in the NFL. And he, you've seen it lately. Whereas before Anthony Lynn, he's a great guy, great human being, but he's not a great game manager, and that's been proven throughout his career with the Chargers. At the onset when they first brought in Herbert, they would run in on first and second down, whereas now they're just letting Herbert air it out. They're giving him the keys to the Ferrari. They're letting him pass first, second down. We see it in the last couple games where, or at least the Bronco game where they were up by 17 points. I think they had 4 games this year where they ended up losing where they were up by 17 points. That could go into maybe them not being aggressive enough and running the ball. Obviously losing Austin Eckler has been huge. Justin Jackson has been solid, but, he's kind of banged up. And unfortunately, Josh Kelley really hasn't produced the way we kind of thought he would at the beginning of the year where, he was looking good. He was, running really fast. And obviously they're all fast, but he just looked really good and playing with a lot of confidence, whereas we've kind of seen that decline. But to go back to your question, Justin Herbert has been excellent. You can argue, had the Chargers not dropped that game, he would be a lock to win the Rookie of the Year. Now, obviously, it's probably going to go to Joe Burrow. It's probably going to be between him and Joe Burrow. It should be a tight race, but, considering what Joe Burrow has to work, I mean, you can argue they both have pretty much the same weapons. But Justin Herbert has been excellent. There's really not enough you can say about him. It's just unfortunate that, the Chargers don't have that great. I mean, they have a good coaching staff, but when it comes to game management and winning ball games, they just haven't, they haven't been fortunate this year. They haven't been able to get the job done. And I don't think that all falls on Justin Herbert. I think that falls on the coaching staff.
You said it just right there, Will. But as much as I love my Ferraris and I love my cars right there, he still doesn't get the key to the Lamborghini. I'm more of a Lambo kind of guy, but he doesn't get the key to the Lamborghini. Reason being is because these Chargers are not finishing right now. They're tripping at the finish line when they should be not even tripping at all. Or if you're going to trip in the beginning of the race. Check out these last 5 games. They can't finish. They always lose by 1 possession. You look at that Raiders game, 31-26. It all came down to that final possession. 31-30 against the Broncos. 39-29, or they beat the Jaguars, on that one. The Saints, 30-27. The Bucks, 38-31. Most important of all, in their division, the Chiefs. They take them to overtime. They gave them their money's worth. And they had an opportunity to win it. And if you tell me right now, they should have won that game 23-20. That was Herbert's debut against a soon-to-be Hall of Famer in Patrick Mahomes and company. This is a team that you're just missing the finishing touch in ball games. I think that's where their biggest problems are. They could be a contender and be keeping up with the Raiders and be keeping up with the Chiefs because, I mean, look at the Raiders. They're a contending team this year. But I think the Chargers are not that far away from being a contender, but got to finish the game strong.
Yeah, no question about it. You said it right there, Alex. I don't want to nitpick. I'm no football expert. I'm not an analyst. But you go back to the last game against the Raiders, that final possession. If they score a touchdown, they win. But you look at it, they were going to go for it. Obviously, they had to play at, 4th down. They go out. Gruden calls a timeout. And then they come out and they show the same exact thing. I was listening to a podcast with former GM Michael Lombardi, who, he's a football guy. But now he has like a podcast with VSN. It's a Vegas Sports Information Network. It's a gambling network. But he was talking about him. He's a guy who's used to be a general manager, and he pointed out that they ran the exact same play, the exact same formation. You cannot do that in the NFL. Like in college, maybe you get away with it because it's head over. Schools like Alabama have way more talent. They're head above shoulders, compared to some other program or majority of programs they face. But in the NFL, if a guy like John Gruden and their D coordinator, you cannot run the exact same formation, same exact play. Like, chances are they're gonna be able to defend it better than they were the first time. So the fact, that just shows me, I don't want to call them incompetent, but it shows me the level of, I don't know, inexperience that the Chargers coach staff has showed. That has to, and again, Anthony Lynn is a great human being. He's a great guy, and I think the players enjoy playing for him. But he's not a great game manager. And I don't know if that falls on him, that falls on the offensive coordinator. That cannot happen. Now, I think in years to come, Herbert will be able to audible out of that. And, as he gets more experience, he'll be able to read defenses better. And he'll say, hey, this isn't going to work. Let's, go to something else. But that whole play was a microcosm almost of their season, where they're just making it too easy for defenses to read or for coaching staffs to read. But, again, Herbert has played great. You're talking about their debut against the Chiefs. He has made some rookie mistakes because you can argue that, he had an interception there where it was like the game changer. After, I think it was the third quarter where he threw a pick. They were driving. Yeah. It was 32. He throws a pick. Chiefs intercept it. They go down and score, and then they end up winning the game. That's happened a couple times this year as well, more than a couple times. So I think eventually he'll get over that. This year, it's hard to say. It's pretty much – I don't see them making the playoffs. They would have to make it a probable run. They have the talent to do it, but I just don't see it happening, especially with their division. With the Raiders playing well, the Broncos playing well. In that Broncos game, that was another one of those games where they should have won. They were up 17 points. Against the Saints, they were up 17 points on Monday night. Against the Buccaneers, they were up 17 points going into halftime. But before that, Josh Kelly fumbled, deep in Tampa Bay's territory. They end up going to score, and they end up winning the game. So it's just a collection of things that, unfortunately, has been a Charger way for quite a while. I'm sorry, Chargers fans. You guys are passionate about your team. But, I don't know. Since they've come to – since they've been in San Diego, they've always had pretty solid teams, talent, but, they tend to choke it in moments. And I hate to say that word, choke it, but that's what they do.
It's the right word. Absolutely. It's the right word to use. They choke it in the final seconds, final possession of the games, and they can't either get a stop or they can't score on that final possession and they make a mistake. So very quickly, Will, what grade would you give the Chargers in this first half, and what do you want to see them improve on here in the second half of the season?
I'll give them a C because offensively they've been really good. I've liked what I've seen from Justin Herbert. He's shown that he's legit and that he's a quarterback of the future. There's no question about that. And, some other guys have shown improvement. He stepped in. Their defense has been okay. They've struggled with injuries. Melvin Ingram was hurt for a while. Chris Harris, they lost him back, I think, in week 3. They haven't had him. Casey Hayward has been banged up. Obviously they lost Derwin James, before the year started. Joey Bosa has been banged up. He didn't play last week. You can argue they maybe win if he plays. I'll give him a C because offensively they have exceeded expectations. Granted, that might have come accidentally given with, Tyrod Taylor's injury because, again, we all know now that Justin Herbert is a way better quarterback than Tyrod Taylor. And that's nothing on Tyrod Taylor, just he has all the skills. So I would give him a C just because, they have done well offensively. They've looked okay defensively. But, their record, they are what their record says they are. And I guess if you go by the record, it'll probably be more like a D+ or a D. But I'll give them a C because they have looked good on the field. And like you mentioned earlier, they've almost all their losses have been by one possession. So, they're doing something right. They just have to figure out how to close out games.
Yeah, I was going to give them the same grade as well. That offense is the only thing that's helping them out, really. That's what's keeping them in these ball games. So I was going to give them a C minus. That's like a 70%, though. Like, if you're asking me, like, they make one mistake, that brings them down to a D plus right there. So that's going to be the grade that I'm going to give for the Chargers. So let's go with a step aside, Will. But when we come back, will the Rams make it to the playoffs this year? Make sure to catch the second half of Sideline Sports Podcast.
This is Hector Aguayo, the long snapper for the Santa Ana Dons, and you're watching Sideline Sports Podcast.
We're back here on Sideline Sports Podcast. I'm the host, Alex Naveja, where if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. First half, we were talking a little bit about the Chargers and what their first half has consisted of. And, of course, the man himself, Will Hernandez from CBSLA sports reporter. And I'm telling you, this is the man when it comes to football. So always a pleasure to have him on. But let's go straight into the business. Rams, Seahawks coming up this Sunday. But, you know, it has been quite the ride for the Rams. How can you describe this first half that the Rams have had?
The Rams have been great. It's been an up and down season for the Rams. Let's just face it. The last game against the Dolphins, arguably the worst performance of Jared Goff's career. He looked like a deer in the headlights. I know it's a cliche, but I posted a lot on Twitter. I'm a Rams fan. When I cover them, I do keep it objective. But, and when I post on Twitter, I try to keep it objective. And in the last game, Jared Goff just wasn't making any reads whatsoever. He wasn't making any pre-snaps reads. He wasn't, trying to adjust the protection. He wasn't reading where the blitzes were coming from. Granted, he might not have known where they were coming from. And part of that was, I think, Brian Flores, coach of the Dolphins, he has Jared Goff's number. He really, he made him look like a rookie quarterback in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago when he was with the Patriots. But that was a couple of weeks ago. Sean McVay, he's one of the top coaches in the league when it comes to preparation. He's one of those coaches you want coming off a bye week. And I expect them to bounce back in a big way this week. It's going to be a tough game, honestly, against the Seahawks. But one good thing about going up against them is that they're one of the worst defenses in the league. They allow up to 372 yards per game to passing offenses. Obviously, they have a great offense of their own with Russell Wilson. But these two teams are two of the best in the league in passing offense. According to Football Outsiders, the Rams are fifth, and right above them is the Seahawks. So if you're a betting man, I would probably take the over this week. I doubt it's going to be a low-scoring game. It could be. You never know. I don't trust the NFL whatsoever. Mm-hmm. We could talk about that later. But, everybody's going to overreact to the Rams' last result against the Dolphins where they just got smoked. It was the Dolphins' defense and special teams that really, exposed the Rams. And, again, Jared Goff had a horrible day. But, he's had a week to, kind of reset, hit the reset button. Sean McVay, I trust in that he's going to, over-prepare for this upcoming game. Sometimes that could be a bad thing, but he'll be prepared. The Rams will be prepared. And, let's see if they can make a push for the playoffs. Granted now, the league announced that if they cancel more games, they may go to 8 playoffs. 8 teams to make playoffs for AFC and NFC. So the Rams definitely have a chance to make the playoffs. And, they're right in the thick of it for the, division title. I mean, the Seahawks lost last week. I think they're at 5-3. The Niners lost last week. And, Seahawks are 6-2. But, the Cardinals, lost last week. So it's wide open for the Rams taking. Most of their games remaining are against division foes. So they're going to have their work cut out for them. But, at the end of the day, I think it's going to come down to, Jared Goff, if he can at least be a game manager. Let's see if McVay puts him in that role. And I also think that they have to continue to run the ball because when they're at their best is when they're running the ball. And they've had success But it seems like, I don't know what it is, from what I noticed, is that when they're running the ball really well, McVay tends to go to the pass. And then, you get caught up the way they did last week against the Dolphins, and then they have to pass the rest of the way. So we'll see. It's definitely not time to hit the panic button if you're a Rams fan.
No, it's still way too early for the Rams fans to really be worried or really be too concerned right now. But that last game against the Dolphins made the Rams made them look like a joke out there, and it just wasn't a game where you're just so confused. Like, wait a minute, this is the Rams. Jared Goff, like, turning the ball over so many times, the amount of picks he threw and fumbling the ball like he did. But I think this was a much needed bye for the Rams. But very good first half for the Rams, I would say. But of course, there's some hiccups here and there. I mean, the Rams losing some of these games that they should have won. I mean, that Bills game, I know they're trying to make a come from behind to win, but I think that was a game they should have won. I think even the Niners game, I still think they could have beat them there on that one, but really hard to tell for as far as how the outcome of the game was. But looking into the second half of the season, it's not going to be a cakewalk for the Rams. It's having to play the Seahawks twice, having the Cardinals coming up, and the Cardinals are a team to not take very lightly. So it's going to be even tougher for the Rams. So you do ask that question up in the air. Can they make it to the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's 6 spots this year. There's the 4 divisions, and then there's 2 wild cards. I could be missing one. But, I like the Rams' chances this year, of making the playoffs at least. They're still 5-3. They still have one of the better coaches in the league. They still have a pretty solid defense led by Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey. They're coming off a bye, and they've actually been pretty solid this year. Now, you mentioned that, they do have a tough, slate coming up. Believe it or not, Russell Wilson is 3-7 in his last 10 games against the Rams. So the Rams defense has, managed to figure him out. And that, of course, falls, in the trenches. The Rams defensive line, ever since they had Aaron Donald, pretty much since they've been in LA, have been a pretty, one of the best defensive lines. So, it's not like the Seahawks have a great offensive line. A lot of it is going to fall in Russell Wilson's hands. But, the Rams have been able to figure them out as of late. And you can argue they should have went 2-0 against them last year. Had Greg Zuerlein not missed a field goal, on Thursday Night Football, they would have won that game if he makes it. Granted, kickers in the NFL is not – being a kicker in the NFL is not an easy job. But, I like the Rams' chances of making the playoffs. As I mentioned, their offense is 5th best. Their passing offense is 5th best in the NFL according to Football Outsiders. They still have a pretty good, collection of offensive talent. They still have a pretty good coach. And, this year, there's no fans really there won't be any fans in Seattle. There won't be any fans or maybe a little bit of fans in Arizona. So, it's wide open for them. Again, I think the biggest thing for them is going to fall on Jared Goff. To me, he has not looked himself this year. He's been okay. But he's made a lot of mistakes and he's missed a lot of throws where he usually makes. Now, I don't know what it is. Obviously he just got handed a really big paycheck a couple of years ago. But a lot of it, too, is going to fall on McVay, where he has to make the right calls. He has to know when to run the ball and stick with the run, even though that might hurt some of our fantasy football teams. It's the right thing to do because Goff has proven you can't really rely on him anymore. Like, if you put all of it in his hands, he's proven that he's struggled, and that's concerning as a Rams fan. So we'll see. However, if you are playing fantasy football, I would recommend playing Jared Goff this weekend because, as I mentioned earlier, Seahawks defense is one of the worst in the league. They just gave up a bunch of points, as you saw, to to the Bills. They gave 49 points to the Bills. They're not good. They're not good at all. Even though they got Jamal Adams back, 44 points. I think McVay will have a good game plan. He's had he's had a week or two to prepare for this. So, to answer your question, I really like the Rams' chances of making the playoffs, especially if they go to the 18 playoff as they announced. I think it was yesterday or Tuesday. But that's only contingent on, if games are canceled, because of COVID.
So I'm going to make this a very quick scenario. I think if Jared Goff can get things going again here in the second half like he did in that Super Bowl year, I'm going to say yes. Rams make it, but I think they'll probably make it in a wild card team. I can even say maybe even division, just because that's how good I know Jared Goff can be when it comes to the passing game. And we've seen that. You and I both know that, Will. But if Jared Goff is not his old self, I'm going to say they miss it by a hair. They miss that final wild card spot by a hair. But if they do have this extended playoffs, if they do have games that have to be, canceled, I say, the Rams definitely, they're going to make it in that. But it all depends on Goff, and that defense is always going to do a good job. Aaron Donald is like the scariest defensive monster in the whole entire league. So if you're any of the remaining teams in their schedule, I would definitely be concerned about playing against the Rams. But to finish things off very quickly, Will, what is the grade you are giving the Rams, and how do you see this second half playing out for them?
I want to give them a C. I think they've been pretty average. Offensively, they've been great. Granted, they've had to pass a lot more, in the games that they've lost. So that kind of beefs up the stats a little bit. But defense, I will say, okay, I'll give them a C+. That's my final grade because, their defense has been pretty good. It's been excellent. The offense has been really, one of their downfalls this year. You look at the game, against the Bills, it took them a while to get going. Against the Niners, they really had nothing going at all. They just looked flat. Jared Goff didn't have his best game. He looked bad. Cooper Kupp had a drop touchdown. They just looked flat overall. And then obviously what happened last week, they've been okay, but I don't think they've reached like their potential. But they are still 5-3. And granted, that's because they have a pretty soft schedule to open the season. So, their work is going to be cut out for them. This week they have the Seahawks. That's not an easy win. Next week, the following week, the Buccaneers. I believe it's a Monday night game. The week after that, the 49ers. Even though they're banged up, they're still tough. They still have Kyle Shanahan, who's probably one of the best play caller, play designer in the NFL. That's not going to be easy. They won't have Jimmy G more than likely. Then a week after that, the Cardinals, and then they have 2 games against the AFC East, and they wrap up the season against the Seahawks and the Cardinals. So, it's not going to be easy for the Rams, but, I think they have the pieces to make a run, into the playoffs. But for now, I think they're pretty much an average team.
We'll just have to wait and see what's to come for the second half, Will. So I think it's going to be an exciting second half for both the Rams and for the Chargers. I say definitely stay tuned for what's to come for both of these teams. But that's all the time we have left here on Sideline Sports Podcast. We thank you all so much for tuning into this one. If you guys enjoyed this content, please give this episode a thumbs up. Also hit the subscribe button down below. That's how we're going to be able to bring in guests like Will Hernandez on a weekly basis for you folks and be able to bring you such great insight. And once again, thank you to the man himself from CBSLA, Will Hernandez. And you know what? Soon to be, we'll see him at a charity golf game or a charity golf being event, or even, who knows, in the Masters one day.
We'll see about that. You'll probably see me over at Whittier Narrows. So if you guys ever want to play golf, hit me up on Twitter. And yeah, thank you, Alex, for having me on once again. It's always a pleasure talking with you. Hopefully next week the next time we talk, we'll be able to talk about, playoff football or, Tiger winning the Masters or whatever it may be. Thank you for having me, and, best of luck to everybody this week. Fantasy football, betting, and, let's just, enjoy the, what we have left for the football season and the weekend of the Masters.
Absolutely. We wish you all the best of luck. I wish you the best of luck also, Will, in all of your future projects or stories that you're covering right now. But make sure to give him a follow. I'll put his social media handles down in the description. But I'm Alex Naveca from Sideline Sports Podcast signing off. And if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, the source of all of your SoCal sports. Have a good one, everybody, and enjoy another week of the NFL football season.